Hello, and welcome to the second edition of Addiction and Mental Health Mythbusters, the show where we try to dispel some of the shame and guilt that goes along with the disease of addiction and mental health. So we're trying to get people out of the shadows, hiding in shame, and to come out and get the right treatment. So our job is to give you the facts, and your job is to join this podcast and share this podcast, share the news. So my name is Meg Telfer, and I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I work in the field of addiction, and thanks to the grace of God, I haven't had to have a drink since 2008. Today's show is going to be about meditation. I use meditation a lot in treatment. And there are a lot of misconceptions and myths about meditation. So today I'm blessed to have Dr. Susan Johnson with me. She is a professor at UNC Charlotte in health psychology. And she has been studying meditation long before it was cool to study meditation. So welcome, Dr. Johnson. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for that introduction. Yes, since 2003, I think was the first paper we presented on mindfulness meditation.
Yes.
So it's been a while. Yes.
Yes. So when I went to do this podcast, I asked people and I said, can everybody meditate? And they're like, yeah, everybody can meditate. No, nobody can meditate. I can't meditate. I hate meditation.
Yes. Yes.
So when I asked Dr. Johnson to join us, she said, I am a researcher. I am not a meditation
advocate.
Advocate. That's right. That's right. So we will definitely get the facts here. And with that, the title of this particular segment, if meditation is so good for me, why can't I do it? I get that a lot. Mm-hmm. And everyone can meditate, true or false. So we'll see what the facts say about that. So first thing, let's talk about what meditation. So I have people who are worried that Satan's going to attack them when they meditate. Have you had any Satan attacks in your research?
No, but I mean, I understand there is a lot of concern. There was a lawsuit in California around this, around teaching mindfulness in schools, in public schools.
Really?
Yeah, it was an interesting case. So some parents were concerned maybe about those kinds of issues, that it was, I don't know if it was something as far reaching as Satan.
Right. And I think part of it is because there is a misconception about what kind of meditation we're talking about. So it is an umbrella term. There is a huge number of meditations. And these are the four most common, but we're going to be talking about the one that when I was researching this, that it became popular in the 90s. So, and that is mindfulness meditation. So how would you describe mindfulness and meditation? How would you describe it to people?
Okay, yes. So a couple of points there. There are a lot of different meditation traditions in all the major world religions have a meditative tradition, which, you can think of as like a contemplative practice,
right?
A stillness practice. So it might be in some traditions, a practice of trying to be one with God or let God enter, right? In mindfulness meditation, which does come from the Buddhist tradition, it certainly does. I think it would be naive to say that it doesn't have anything to do with Buddhism.
Right.
But mindfulness is not just meditation, but we can talk about that in a second. But so mindfulness meditation is, again, a set of practices. It's, like other meditations, it usually involves sitting quietly, and it can be either focused or open monitoring. So focused is probably the most common one, and the one that I've used in my research, which is mindfulness of breathing.
Right.
So it's just becoming focused on your breath, and you're aware of your thoughts. Your thoughts come, you lose your focus on your breathing and you bring it back. You try to let your thoughts sort of go. You can observe them, but not get attached to them and not bring them into a story, right? So you're letting them go.
Right.
Clouds or like a leaf in the river, those kinds of images.
Yeah, that's what I started with, counting my breaths.
Yes, and counting breaths is a good way to stay focused. Yeah. And yeah, do you do the one where you count up to 10?
Yes.
And then start again? Yeah, that's a really common technique and very useful, I think. So then open monitoring is usually a little more difficult and maybe even a little more advanced in the sense that you want to have a decent practice before you try it, because it's very easy to get distracted, because what you're doing in open monitoring is you're not focusing, you're just letting what comes into your mind just come there and observe it. Or it can be, well, no, mindfulness of sounds is another one, but that's probably more, would come under more of a focused, that you just, a good way to learn the concept of impermanence is to do mindfulness of sound, because it's so easy to understand how a sound appears and then disappears.
Right.
And
interesting.
Yeah. And so that's the one that sometimes is a good one to do. You know, and also to not judge sounds, right? To not judge sounds as either, you know, aversive, oh, I hate that noise, but just see them as arising and not tell a story about them and then passing away. So all of those can be useful techniques of mindfulness meditation.
Yes. When you were talking about not having a focus, so contemplative prayer is kind of the Christian version of that. And it's like you have a sacred word, and that's what anchors you. And then you have, like Richard Rohr says, a river, and those thoughts just go, all thoughts to God. And I found that definitely a lot harder than counting my breaths. In fact, sometimes I have to go back to counting my breaths because I just get so distracted. It's like.
And do you use just one word like peace or like Jesus? Like what kind of, I have tried it, but I haven't done it for a while. Although, you know, I think that's interesting, especially with people who have, and I've always wanted to do a study that compared centering prayer to mindfulness.
Right.
Because I wonder, you know, of course, that would make it more inviting to people who had strong Christian beliefs.
Right.
Sort of more Christian contemplative practice.
Right. And I looked it up. Actually, in the Bible, meditation is mentioned over 30 times. And in Psalms, there's a lot of, you know, which would make sense. There's a lot of references to meditating on the word, meditating on the glory of God. And my sacred word was the Holy Spirit, because for me, that's the tangible representation on this earth. That's for me, the good stuff. So, but for me, the problem is sounds. Like I live with a bunch of people and I have dogs, and for some reason, if I use a bell, you know, you have those apps that'll have a bell that'll start you and it'll go ding.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm trying to get into it, right? You know, I bring in the Holy Spirit and my dog starts barking every time. Like I cannot use that app anymore because
because of this.
The dog starts barking. And that's why when you were mentioning sounds, I'm like, I definitely think all sounds are evil when I'm trying to meditate, because I'm like, squirrel, I cannot stay focused. So you mentioned mindfulness earlier, and I think there is some confusion out there of the difference between mindfulness meditation and being mindful. So I love this little cartoon of the girl who's like just paying attention to what's going on around her, and the dad, or I think that's dad.
The adult.
The adult, we'll use they for that, for that person is full. And isn't that so common, the way we often are in our world? So well,
that's sort of like beginner's mind, right? The idea of being more childlike, or more full of wonder at the world. And, you know, kids are more naturally like that.
Right.
So I think this brings up this issue of being mindful without meditating. So
Right.
I want to say a couple things about that. So I think it's good to do mindfulness meditation, and from that we'll sort of grow a greater sense of mindfulness of everyday life. Because it's hard to just, especially probably with beginners or people who have like attention issues or are in like early recovery, who are like super distracted and restless and, have just sort of these feelings of irritation and anger, that there can be just mindful activities that can be helpful, or very short meditations,
Right.
really short, like 2
minutes.
or 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's what we do, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it. And then you can do mindfulness of, I remember a long time ago reviewing this really interesting paper that was about mindfully washing the dishes. So things like that, and probably the easiest and most accessible, not easy, simple.
Okay.
You're all simple, but not easy, right?
Yes.
So a simple way to get at mindfulness of everyday life is mindful eating.
Yes.
Because, we all eat all day and of course, that's one of the places where we see our distracted mind. How often do you like flip up your computer and then you eat your whatever? And
all the time.
All the time. Check your emails, check the news, do. And so that's a really hard one. I really been trying to do that lately. Not even eat mindfully, just eat without doing something else. When eating, only eat. Like that's so simple, but not easy, right? So just, and of course, if you want to take it further, you would, eat more slowly and, really look at your food and think about where it came from and all those other kinds of things that you can sort of add into mindful eating. But that's one where, of course, our culture is so divorced from that, the way we're just, we eat and why we're watching TV or, all kinds of stuff. And our culture is so full of extremely entertaining distractions.
Yes, the phone.
That are there so easily, especially with our phones. And so there's other things like, just walking around and really looking, mindfulness of trees, for example. There's lots of, or even mindfulness of listening. I'm sure in your work, that's a big one, really listening to what the other person is saying. All those kinds of things you can bring mindfulness into, but I do think it's helpful to try to do a practice. And that doesn't mean you have to meditate every day. Some days you're just not going to be up for it. And so that's fine.
Yeah.
But to get sort of a sense of what it's all about, to try to do it and bring it into your life, I think is going to be more fruitful.
Right.
But it's not for everybody. And we can talk about that too.
But for me, what doing mindfulness meditation opened me up to is when I was drinking, I was drinking to not feel. Well, and when you don't feel, you ignore your body. And when you feel sick as a dog from drinking, you have to ignore your body too, because your body's screaming, please, not another drop. And you're like, sorry, body, but I don't know how to do it without it. So this is how I cope. But so when I first got sober, I couldn't meditate. I couldn't, closing my eyes, my thoughts would race and I would feel like, it just made me crazy. And sometimes I still feel that way.
Sure.
But after working out some of the past hurts and letting go of them, I did finally start. And I started with 2 minutes with my timer on my microwave. And because, it worked.
Wow.
And it seemed like a long time, but what I noticed after doing it, after kind of getting the hang of it, was that I became much more aware of not only what I was thinking, but what was going on in my body. You know, I would do a scan starting at the top of my head and go down. And that's what I have my clients do too. And where am I holding stress? But after a while, like I'll get up in the morning and I'll do my quiet time and I'll feel stressed. I can tell my shoulders are tight. I'll be like, you just woke up. What has happened so bad between the bedroom and the couch? But I never was aware of that until I started meditating. And now my body almost tells me you're not processing something before my head does.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it is an awareness practice, right? I mean, all the meditations are awareness practices. So you are becoming aware of both your body and your mind. Like,
right.
You know, if you're sitting still and you're not distracted, you're just sitting there, right? And I mean, why that's considered a punishment though, right? That's solitary confinement.
Yeah.
That's considered the worst, you know, an inhumane form of torture.
Time out, right? Isn't that what we do with little kids? Oh, you were bad. Go sit in time out.
Exactly.
Go do some mindful meditation.
So there's a reason. Yeah, there's a reason that is considered torture or punishment. Because we want to be distracted, right? We need to be distracted. Part of that's evolutionary, like we need to be vigilant.
Right.
And then we're also scanning the horizon, and there's so much out there now to like pull us in and hijack us, and we just get hijacked by our own mind. So, I mean, that's one of the helpful things I think about meditation is to become so aware of where your mind goes, and to gradually develop the ability to not be hijacked by your thoughts and feelings and sensations too, like you're talking about, like just feeling uncomfortable.
Right.
In your body. You find it easier to do first thing in the morning. Me too. So the mind just isn't as full, you know, if you think of it as like a jar of muddy water that you're trying to let it still, but as you get up and go through your day, it just gets muddier and muddier. So in the morning, it's just, if you can, of course, sometimes you have to get up and do whatever, but if you can, I find that that's where my mind is already a little bit stiller.
Right.
So that's helpful.
Yeah, I will get up, do my quiet time, have some meditation and prayer, and then I'll go for a walk. And that's really where I try to do the mindfulness, because it is easy for me to start thinking about what's my next podcast. What am I going to do with this client? You know,
Sure.
And I'm missing out. I live in the country. It's beautiful. And I'm missing out. And there are beautiful sunrises. Yeah. And I'll catch myself and I'm like, oh my, sorry, God. I guess I was thinking, I know better. I don't know, but you've given me this gift and I want to appreciate it. So, and I feel so much better. It's like I tell people I can have a really bad day, but it's still a good day because I did that to begin with, you know, like I did some self-care, I guess is what I think of it as. Yeah. So you actually teach a class for college kids on mindfulness, right? Isn't that what we talked about? I teach a class called Mindfulness Theory, Research, and Practice. I really try to bring some healthy scientific skepticism into this field, because the field has been incredibly hyped and popularized. And some would say McMindfulness, for example, is the sort of hyper-capitalist version of mindfulness, and teaching it in corporations to make people more productive. And those kinds of issues are things that we address. And also we address, what is the evidence really telling us? Like, what are, how solid are these benefits? Who benefits? Yes. So, sort of efficacy and feasibility
and acceptance of, and acceptance, I mean, not in a Buddhist sense, but acceptance in terms of, you know, dropout rates, how many people just don't. And so a couple interesting things we found. One was when people drop out, they drop out right away. So they drop out after 1 or 2, and then you see this big plunge, and you lose about, I think it was like almost about 40% of your sample at those early days. Right. And then you have another, you know, sort of smattering of people that you lose around the halfway point. And, but most people, if they make it to 3, they make it to 10, right? So then, okay, of course we were interested in, okay, so a couple things. So what predicted whether people would do all 10? Right. The biggest predictors were their baseline level of mindfulness. So which makes perfect sense. Yes. So they're already people who, and this is on a self-reported scale. There's a number of scales. There's like that. But so anyway, so having higher, you know, baseline, right, before these are all people who've never meditated before. Right. That's what we always use in our studies. And it's probably going to get harder to do, but people who are meditation naive. And then the second predictor of adherence was conscientiousness. So that's a personality trait. Right. And which makes sense too. Yes. Not surprising, right? Yeah. None of the other ones did. Sometimes people find higher neuroticism, you know, negatively impacts, but we did not find that. And openness, I thought might be openness to experience. That wasn't extroversion. That didn't matter. So those were all, you know, non-significant. Right. The other thing we were interested in that we thought would be important was obstacles. So we had this whole list that we had generated from an earlier study on don't have enough time, doesn't align with my beliefs. Right. I get too distracted. I hear that one all the time. I don't like this. It's just another thing to do, you know, sort of, you know, the idea that it's just adding to my to-do list. Right. A whole bunch of just very common obstacles. And so we collected that. Initially, we had collected that halfway, but then the second study, we realized everyone's dropping out at the beginning. So we had to collect it after the first session. Yeah. So that was, you know, sort of an improvement. So we collected that after the first session and then at the end, after the last session. And obstacles didn't matter. Everyone has them. Right. Right. People in the adherent groups, people that finished had obstacles. The people that didn't finish had obstacles. I thought that was interesting. I think that's very interesting. Yeah. So we thought I had this idea about mindfulness for the masses. Like, what's the lowest dose? That's what I was interested in. Like, what's the lowest dose that you can give and still see some effects? And we had really no idea what that would be. So so we started out with 4 days. So people, this is using undergrads. They would come into the lab for 4 days in a row, hopefully. Of course, if they miss one, you reschedule, so on. And we had a trained instructor. I had a grad student, Fadil Zaidan, who was trained in mindfulness in India. And so he would lead these small groups, 3 or 4 students in our lab. And in 20 minutes a day, 20, 25 minutes, and then they would come back and they do it. And we did some 4 days, we did some 3 days. And then I also did a 1 session to sort of get at that question of, well, is it just because you're testing them after the last session? Right. Maybe you could just do it in 1 session. But it turns out that 1 session is not enough, except for a little bit of reduced anxiety, a little bit of mood effects, but no attention effects. That's the one over there, the improves cognition. So that study, that got a lot of attention at the time. So this was 4 days, as you can see, so it's 4 sessions. And we were looking at measures of focused attention. So we're using a few different cognitive tasks, some, that's symbol digit. I think that's symbol digit modality. Fluency is how many words can you think of that start with the letter M? You have 1 minute, and then the other one is hit rate. That's an NBAC task, which is pretty complicated, actually. You see these numbers come up And then you have to, you see like a string of numbers, like 3, 7, 9. And then you have to add the number you just saw to the number 2 back. So this is an N back test. So that's 2 back. And then say that number while more numbers are appearing. So super hard.
Yeah. Terrible.
Super focused.
I'm glad I wasn't in that study.
Yeah. So yes, you can see they get better at that.
Right. Look at here.
The
these
meditators at the 4 sessions after they've had
big
that
time. Yeah. And these are all statistically significant.
Yeah. Yeah. That was cool.
Yeah.
So, you know, we did suggest that brief mental training, as we called it, can improve focus. Now,
I think reassurance. So I know, like, I had people in my life that had seen the benefit of meditation and who had gone through some of the issues that I was facing. So I could call them up and I'd be like, I can't do this, you know, like my head is crazy. And they'd be like, oh yeah, just hang in there. That's normal. And just getting that kind of reassurance kind of helped me get through it. But I
expect crazy. Like,
exactly.
That, right? Yeah, that's what, you know, when I do it with my students, they have this idea, they come to this mindfulness class and they sort of think they know what it is. And they think it's going to make them feel like, oh, I'm going to de-stress and relax. And then they try it and we do some, you know, pretty preliminary, easy, basic 10-minute things. And they're like, oh, man, that was horrible. You know, my mind is just flying all over the place. I can't do this. And I'm like, no. You're just becoming more aware that your mind is flying all over the place.
Right.
And that's fine. That's fine. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That is the practice.
Yeah.
Becoming aware of your mind.
And to not be judgmental about it. And so we talked earlier about my experience with people in early recovery. And so here are 2 studies on substance abuse. One's with opiates, the other one's with all. And they had interesting results. So this particular study by Hempel did not find a lot of benefit. And that really surprised me because I have read lots of these studies and they all showed that the group that got the mindfulness-based recovery did better. And you can see here in Eric Garland's work, he did find that they did better. And these are both meta-analysis because
that's good.
There's so many studies out there. If I were to list all the studies, I mean, yeah,
that's the beauty of meta-analysis.
Yeah, exactly.
Just get the most recent meta-analysis.
Yeah, exactly. So, and this is what Hempel attested it to is minimize participation attrition to improve competence. They had such high dropout rates. And this goes back to what we started with, even though the benefits of, you know, feeling more serene, being less judgmental, having higher concentration, being able to focus on tasks and, you know, they're all great. And there's health benefits, you know, there's lots of health benefits like you found in that one study, less pain. Didn't you do one with multiple sclerosis or something a long time ago? I think this was some of your
that was not with mindfulness. I have done MS studies, but that was not with mindfulness. But there are some studies with MS, and there are, of course, studies with pain. That's what Fadil Zaidan's done a lot of work with, pain.
Right.
But I think the attrition issue is huge. People, you know, if you're only studying the people that stick with the program, it's not super surprising that you get positive effects.
Right.
You're losing everybody. You're losing everyone who's not getting any benefit.
Right.
And that it has not been emphasized enough in the hype that mindfulness is great for everything and everyone should be doing it, because a lot of people can't tolerate it, or they find it aversive, right?
Yeah.
You know, sitting with their moment-to-moment experience is painful, and they don't want to do it. They, you know, it's maybe better to talk to somebody, you know, to talk to their sponsor, to talk to other folks, to talk to their counselors, people like you.
Therapists, yeah.
Yes, the therapist, like that is a special relationship. And that can be super healing. And maybe then, then maybe they can sit still, right? But, there's a lot of things that people might need to work through. And I think a lot of times people might have a meditation practice that is really just sitting there for 10 minutes a day, just daydreaming, right? And, that's fine, but that's not really mindfulness. It probably takes a while to get to the point where you're really meditating.
I think
and
so.
There's no reason that that everyone should be good at that, or I mean, good isn't the right word, that everyone should be attracted to that practice.
Right.
Some people will get a lot more by going for a run or a walk in nature or bird watching or, talking to a little kid.
Yeah, playing music is a good one,
Yes, music. Yes.
Laughing with somebody, just being present in a conversation. So this is the quote she sent me when I asked her, would she be willing to do this? And she said, just remember.
Just remember. I love this.
Yes, that
Eleanor Roche is a Buddhist. I think she teaches at Berkeley too. I think she's a cognitive scientist or something. Yeah, but also a real Buddhist, not like me.
Not a take what you want kind of and leave the rest.
Salad bar. Yes.
Yes, but I do think, and I have seen this in working with people, that they don't want to pay attention to their everyday experience because it hurts. And, so one of the things that I struggle with getting people to let go of is this judging, comparing. And that I think meditation does help with, because you learn to allow things to be. I have this friend, she's like, Meg, not everything has to have meaning. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? But it's so true. She's like, people sometimes behave a certain way and it doesn't have anything to do with me. Right. I take it and apply it to myself. Yeah. Somebody might be having a bad day. It doesn't mean that they dislike me or they're trying to upset me. And, but we're so used to judging, comparing, and even our language, big, small, tall, short. I mean, we have a language of comparing, and that's actually Roche does a lot on linguistics, which I think is fascinating too. But, so I tell people, look, when you focus inward, okay, you're much less likely to start comparing. When you're focused outwards, you're going to be comparing. But when you're focused inward, all that unprocessed pain and your brain, where the disease resides, takes over. So you can only focus inward in controlled situations like meditation. Because if you're in your head all day, I mean, you can convince yourself of just about anything.
Well, you tell so many stories. Like,
yes, exactly.
You're storytelling creatures, right? So we're always spinning stories. And that's another idea behind becoming more mindful, is to kind of almost like escape the loop of stories that is playing, like a movie in your mind. And to that gift that you're talking about, that your friend is talking about, is like to not take things personally, right? Not permanent, not perfect, not personal, right? That's, a good way to think about when you're getting caught up in a story, or you're getting offended or angry or annoyed or pissed off, is like, it's not permanent. Whatever this is, the thoughts or the situation, it's gone. All those annoyances and hurts and griefs, where are they now?
Right.
Where are they? They're gone. Right. And so they're not permanent. And And the hardest one though is that it's not personal, because you're like, well, it is personal, right?
Yes.
But the Buddhists would say it's not personal. It just arises. Things arise out of causes and conditions.
Right.
And that, so it's that's a cool one if you can get to that.
Well,
but it's not personal.
What I think of is, okay, so one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife or ass. And I can remember going, what does this have to do with me? First of all, I'm a woman, I'm not going to covet a wife, and an ass. I mean, that makes no sense. But now what really that commandment means is don't compare and envy. And that's what we do when we compare ourselves, and we're either better than or worse than.
And we compare our children.
Oh, our children, my weight, women, oh, terrible. We look at these ads and, these aren't even real. Like, I think they should have warnings on these magazines, warnings. This is not real life, because we compare and we always find ourselves less than. And one thing I stress to people is you're comparing their outsides to your insides. You have no idea how that person feels. So they may look like they've got it all together, but inside they may be hurting. You don't know. And you know how you feel. So you're setting yourself up for failure. Or the other way is that you put people down. Oh, well, thank God I'm not them. And that's really...
downward social comparisons. There's upward and downward.
You're trying to boost yourself up, and neither one is healthy, because they end up in us making judgments that have repercussions on our psyche. And so it is really hard to teach people through conversation how to be aware of their judging. Like, I have a thought journal I'll give them. And it's amazing how these random thoughts, and what it is what happened, what your thought was about it, how it made you feel, and what you did. And so it might be, I wish that guy would shut up, and he's so stupid, and my feeling is irritation, and I just tune out, so, but I'll get these random thoughts, and a lot of it is based on beliefs, and I can see their beliefs scattered throughout it, and their beliefs are causing them to make judgments. But
thoughts are little dictators.
Yes. And it is making them feel bad, feel anxious, feel angry, feel depressed. And so when you show this out and you can rethink these beliefs, you can come to a healthier way of perceiving the world. But this is where meditation can be really helpful, because they don't realize they're doing it most of the time.
They're not aware.
No. And so when you meditate, you become just more, I mean, I hate that buzzword, intentional living, intentional. No, but I want to live at least where I am aware of my thoughts and how they're making me feel, so I don't get spun up. As I protect my serenity. But I also am not always aware of my thoughts, but because I've been doing a practice of either contemplative prayer or meditation, mindfulness, I am so much more aware of my body, mind, spirit connection. And that's why I try to have people consider it. I mean,
I think you can introduce it, lightly, and it's just a tool, like people can try. And maybe they're not ready to do it when I know you see people very early in recovery. So, but it's something that they'll remember, and they'll come across it again, and maybe it'll be a better time. And some people do take to it right away and really find it almost transformational. And, that's just a handful of people, but I've definitely come across in my, many years doing this in whether it's in a study or in a class setting. And, some people find it really, really helpful. So it's certainly worth it to try, but I don't think people should feel bad at all if it's not for them.
Yes, exactly. So the myth busted, can everyone meditate? And we are going to say, no. No,
Yeah.
not everybody can meditate, and that is okay.
Yeah, it's definitely some people, either there's so many reasons. One is that they just can't be still at this time in their life. Another is they don't see the point, right? It can just be like, this does nothing for me. I've tried it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there. What was the title that you said, why can't I do, what was your title again?
Oh yeah, if meditation's so good for me, why can't I do it?
Why can't I do it? Yeah. So everyone has, not everyone, but everyone in the sort of podcast world has heard about meditation at some, mindfulness at some points become so mass popularized. And so I think a lot of people have tried it and just don't get it. Maybe it's because they didn't stick with it. And certainly at the beginning, you're really not meditating at first. You're really just sort of trying it. You're setting aside this time and, not much is happening of any benefit at all. So it might just feel like a waste of time.
Right.
And, then some people might really do stick with it and find, I still don't think it's really that helpful.
Where mindfulness is just a kind way of recognizing what's going on and not judging it and being okay with it and learning to find some peace with that mind-body connection, with the way your thoughts operate. I kind of think of it as like the happy meditation, it's where some of those other practices, I think, have a lot different end game. We're not trying to find a spiritual experience here. You might, but we're really just trying to get you to learn more about what is going on in your head and how can you calm it down, be okay with it, learn to enjoy your life without being so judgmental. And really for me, it just helps me feel more peaceful. In the end, that's what I get out of it, is that I have a sense of peace. And I'm more aware of what's going on around me. And so but
I think part of it is not, part of the non-judging is not judging whether it's happy or annoying or you're impatient. And all of those are all okay.
Right.
You don't have to feel happy or peaceful because maybe your mind is not happy and peaceful. But it's more just being aware and accepting, like you said, like accepting what's happening in your mind.
Right.
And, as you, and that makes you more equipped to let go and see these, you see how these thoughts arise and pass away. And all your experiences will arise and pass away.
Yes.
And if you don't cling to them and tell stories about them, then you will feel some peace.
Yes, exactly. In fact, there is a story in the AA Big Book about this doctor who just could not accept that he was an alcoholic. Like, that's just unacceptable. And he says, and acceptance is the answer. My serenity is inversely proportionate to my acceptance. And who am I to tell God that this thing, place, person is not exactly as it's supposed to be? And when I can accept what's going on as it's being what it's supposed to be, and I'm not judging it or fighting it, I can find some serenity. I can find some acceptance.
It's so interesting that AA sort of wisdom is very echoed in a lot of mindfulness books, and mindfulness wisdom is very, the serenity prayer, the acceptance ideas are, things, if so people who have been in Al-Anon or AA be like, oh, I've heard this before, like this is not new, right? It's not new. Who knows? But there is a lot of and it does make sense why mindfulness might be helpful in recovery.
Right.
But again, it's not for everybody. I think it's a process and a tool that people can can try to use, and some people might embrace it and it may become, much more of a part of their life, and other people will just, use it as a technique that's helpful. It can be, of course, a way of life, right?
Right. Right.
But,
is step 11 that we improve our conscious contact through prayer and meditation. So in AA and any 12-step program, meditation is something that's encouraged, but it is also, in my experience, one of the last things that people talk about.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, step 11, you're
Yeah.
through all the steps, you've done all the work. And you found some serenity with who you are. And then now let's try to meditate. So it kind of goes back to where we started, that wherever you're at in your life, if you can certainly try it. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. But you can always come back to it too. Maybe your circumstances will change and you'll find that there is a place for it. Maybe. So, you never know where people are going to be at, but thank you so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I hope everybody watching has gained some new insight as to what meditation is and what it's not. And if you can't do it, that's okay.
Totally okay.
Yes, totally okay.
For yourself.
We're gonna have acceptance today, right? Because that's the answer. So anyway, thank you.
Self-compassion.
Yeah, self-compassion. Absolutely.